Plus,
at least once a year.
right. Well, plus you look at the historical El Ninos, which they talk
Official
about in
MC.
terms of conditions in Peru over the hundreds and hundreds of years. Well, there weren't any cars running around a couple hundred years ago, and they were still getting El Nino effects. So what is it really? And if you think about heat hitting the surface of the oceans from the sun, most of the energy is reflected. Very little absorbed into the ocean itself, and when it is, it stays on the surface, because as soon as you drop a foot or two below the surface, temperatures start dropping dramatically. Right. And then if you look at the satellite images of an El Nino, they have a hot spot, and then they radiate out like a plume, right? And you remember these images where they have the red and the yellow and the green, and it radiates out like a plume. Well, to me, what I would look at is the...
Another minute. Hey, there she is. Okay, we're waiting about 30 seconds to start the video.
I'm generally the one always late out.
Thank you. And Sean. Okay, we're all here now.
Toothpick's gone too. No. I'm so happy.
Okay. You're going to cue me, Ted?
How are you, St. Nick? What's going on?
We're rolling. Okay. Welcome to the 2012 panel discussion, Ancient Prophecy, Modern Prediction. My name is Betty Binder, and I will be moderating this afternoon's panel. You're going to have an opportunity to hear some outstanding speakers, and in the last hour or so, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. What do ancient wisdom and modern science predict will happen in 2012? Will violent earth changes, technological and political manipulation, and economic collapse overwhelm this planet? Or will scientific advancement, space travel, rediscovery of ancient lost civilizations, and a new era of elevated spiritual consciousness be realized? Today, we have the opportunity to learn about our future from scientists, prophets, and students of esoteric traditions. We have a very wide variety of backgrounds on this panel today, and it will be my pleasure to introduce each of these speakers. We're going to start first with Dr. Dana Dunn, an old friend from more than one lifetime. I work in past life regression work, in case you're not aware of that, and that's what that comment was about. Dana is an expert in shamanic traditions. She's an astrologer in the esoteric meanings of 2012 and Venus rising, which will be in June of 2012. We have a lot to learn from her today, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dana Dunn.
Yay!
Thank you, Betty. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2012 panel, Ancient Prophecy, Modern Prediction. You can't hear me back there? Okay. Okay. You let me know when you can hear me. Down. You can tell I haven't been a mic person in a past life.
Can you hear at the back of the room? Is there anybody? Good. Okay. Go ahead, Dana. Use the mic.
All right. Can you hear me now? I'm not with Verizon. Thank you, Dan. Okay, my name is Dana Dunn. I am a professional intuitive and a licensed astrologer. However, though, today, for a brief period, I am going to act as an ancient astronomer priestess and an oracle looking into our past and our future.
That's what we talking about.
Yeah. What makes 2012 so special? In order to answer this question, it required me to among the ancient ruins of the Mayans and other great civilizations, using modern resources in addition like those of NASA's website and the History Channel, Decoding the Past, Mayan Doomsday Prophecy. That is a video worth watching. I had to understand why 2012 was so special and why the Mayans and other ancient cultures looked to the stars for these answers. What I found was astonishing. The Mayans were meticulous astronomers and record keepers. At Nitsa, I discovered that on the vernal equinox, a great serpent descends from heaven to earth. The serpent is called in honor of the great Mayan god Kukulkan. According to the Mayan Dresden codices, he is said to return in the year 2012. In other cultures, astrologically, 2012 is the year of the dragon. So we have evidence that the serpent/dragon will play a valuable role in 2012. Snakes and dragons have long been associated to wisdom, enlightenment, power, rebirth, shedding the old to begin anew. All over the world, there are snakes carved in stone, and almost every ancient religious site, including the Vatican and in the caves. A recent find was in Botswana and is believed to be the oldest site, dating the artifact to be 70,000 years old. Moving forward, however, the Mayan also predicted other unusual events for 2012 in the form of rare cosmic astronomical alignments. One rare alignment occurs on winter solstice, December 21st, 2012, when the solstice sun will be aligning with the center of the Milky Way. At this same time, the Earth completes a wobble around the axis known as the precession. By completing this 26,000-year precession, it changes our planet's angular orientation within the galaxy. This event occurs only once every 26,000 years, so all of us in this room today will hopefully be here to witness this great and rare event. According to the Mayan, the sun's alignment to the Milky Way is known as the sun entering the dark rift, the cave, or the underworld. Prior to this alignment, in 2009, Venus will complete her great cycle of 7 consecutive years of 7 consecutive 40-year cycles. Many ancient societies believe this to be a time when the great oracle speaks, or the light of the divine Shekinah speaks to all the original oracle centers around the globe. Will be there to receive the message that this heavenly oracle speaks to the inhabitants of Earth. According to the Mayans, we presently are in the current Pt1. That began in 1993 and ends in 2012. It predicts, and I quote, "During this period, according to Shalom Balaam, who was a Mayan priest who wrote the predictions, the supreme deity will return to earth and herald in the start of a new age. It is a Keton of remembering, a time of scarcity." Keton 2 cycles in after 2012. Its message reads, and I quote, "For half there will be food, for others misfortunes, a time of the end of the word of God, a time for uniting for a cause." So these are the predictions from the past. Now I will give my modern predictions using the knowledge of the Mayans and my awareness to remember. I feel that the message sent from on high is one which requires us to change. It appears convenience at any cost, along with money and greed seem to rule the day. Some ancient schools of thought believe the serpent is a warning. So the message I channeled is this: we should have been reflective and learned from the past lessons. What have we learned from our own history, our own reflection? Have we become so arrogant to be narcissistic? History, as the Mayans would say, repeats itself in cycles. Perhaps the Mayans are asking us to remember that the keys to our future lie in our past. Like Atlantis with her advanced technology, she also brought about her demise. They too had great knowledge, technology, and power. We presently have reached the same ability. Have we learned from our past that technology without consideration and consciousness leads to destruction and demise? Many other great civilizations were also accomplished. They too lie in ruin, either by their own hand or by the hands of greed and power. Earth is preparing her children for a new beginning, a new birth of a new era, preparing for the age of Aquarius, which will bring with her all the Aquarian attributes of consciousness and rebellion. There can be no birth, no new beginning without preparation, without cleansing and change. As we are already seeing, there will be further cycles of climatic weather changes, more tectonic activity, earthquakes and volcanic. Our world began in a spontaneous moment of creative expression, whether it be by the hand of a divine creator or the Big Bang. This creative expression had a desire to stand alone, to be a part of a greater whole, yet unique, individual, independent, alive, but not separate, still part of a greater whole. Yet intolerance and further isolation have become part of the tyranny. The I am has become the I am more special and more important than anything or anyone else. Me first attitudes have led us into greater separatism. We have become lazy arrogant. We have become complacent. Let someone else do it. I don't want to get involved. I don't have time. Going back to our beginning, we are the inheritors of this earth. And we must experience the same birth that our planet Earth did in her beginning. We must be birthed out of the darkness, the dark womb that kept us isolated, protected, and safe. We must birth ourselves a second time, like the Christed energy, to be elevated, to be put on high. Remember in the Mayan Pt1, too, a time of the end of the Word of God. Perhaps what they are really saying is so many speak of God, yet how many are unified by the power and understanding of God? Talk is cheap, but to live God, we must love all things which were created by God. This requires us to change our perception. In order to do this, we must now go within ourselves, explore our own depths, face our own fears, conquer isolation and separatism in order to reach true union, the union that can come only from within. When we unite ourselves to the God within ourselves, we must do it independent from others. No more leaders, no more followers, no more martyrs, no more victims. God was nothing but love, and we have destroyed so many with our intolerance of God, whether it be yours, mine, or someone else's. We have become so arrogant to think we own God and we own our earth. If we are going to achieve victory, then we, like in 2012, must enter the galactic cave, battle our demons, come out victorious, and be rebirthed. Will we be ready? Will we enter it without fear or trepidation? The entering of this cave or underworld, as the Mayans say, is the sun entering the underworld to do battle with the demons, only to be victorious in the end. The battle, nonetheless, is fought within. We can't all run to caves to fight demons as the sun might. However, the cave is in our minds. It is where we will fight the greatest battles this lifetime. If we are to achieve union with our God, our galaxy, our earth family, and our star family and the greater heavens, then we must achieve union within ourselves. As the ancients once said, and I quote, "As above, so below. As within, so without." So we, like our sun, must go within, fight our inner battles, and come out of the darkness victorious. Just as our world was formed by dark matter, it broke through the darkness to join the other lights that also came to the realization that there is something greater than self. It did require an action. It required to go against the chaos, to restore the natural order, to bring it to balance and harmony, unifying it by a single focus. That focus being the love of all things, to feel and see the sacredness of being truly connected. If we are wise, we will hear the message. We will begin to take affirmative action. We will no longer say, "What can I do?" Nothing changes. It doesn't matter. It may require us to get off our internets, couches, and TVs and reconnect to the earth and her inhabitants, to learn to love instead of criticize and judge, to reach out without cell phones or iPods hanging off our ears. Have we forgotten how to really listen? What would happen if for just an hour a day the whole world shut down, turned off? Could we hear the faint whisper of our earth asking us to awaken? As Bob Marley once said so eloquently, and I quote, "Rise from your sleepless slumber, wake up and live. Rise, you mighty people, there's work to be done, so let's do it a little by little. Or will you choose to continue to sleep, to continue to put off what needs to be done? It is up to you." Some may continue only to find in their arrogance that we have forgotten that there is an order to this universe, and an order to our earth. On our earth, there is a hierarchy and an effective connected chain of command. It begins with the mineral kingdom, then the plant or vegetable kingdom, then the animal kingdom, next the human kingdom, and last but not least, the spiritual kingdom, or better known as heaven on earth. Our arrogance has led us to believe that we are all that matters. We have forgotten that it is a continuum, that it is a beautiful, delicate circle of life. The other three kingdoms that we were given dominion over collapse from our abuse, we will be next. The message has been delivered. Hopefully you will herald its prophetic warnings. We have been given the ability to change our future. We have within us everything we need to grow to become a part of the greater galactic picture. We also have the ability to destroy us in the single push of a button. We do not own our planet. She is a gift. We must learn to unite conscious living. Glad you could all make it today. You're doing your part. Enjoy the remainder of the Conscious Life Expo.
Thank you, Dana.
This has been a public service announcement.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome, Betty.
Our next speaker has been doing a lot of traveling recently and has a great deal to share with us about insights not only from his spiritual experiences in the past, but in the last several years, which I think will be very relevant to what's happening in 2012 and what he would like to talk to us about today. It is my pleasure to introduce Danian Brinkley.
Go, baby. Get down, big dog.
You'll get your turn too, Sean.
What? We love Sean. Okay, everybody. I could never be as eloquent as that. That was fabulous. But here's where I come from. In 1968, I went to the Mexico City Olympics to see Jimmy Hines run the 100-yard dash because I grew up as a power sprinter. He was the fastest man on earth, and I decided to skip school, lie to my parents, and go to Mexico. I saw Hines run the 100. I saw the expression in his face as he sprinted to the fastest 100-yard dash until that day ever run. And after that, the people I was with, they decided to go to a place called Teo. And I didn't care. It was some ruin, some pile of rocks some Mexicans had built, you know, and so, okay, I'd go see it. So I rode out in the car, and I got out. It was the most magnificently constructed building and city, laid out city and plaza you could imagine. That was 39 years ago. I've been going to Central America and South America, and any place they have a story of ancient history or an ancient culture now for 39 years. Because I was so amazed at what I saw in Mesoamerica. Do you realize that 2 hours from Houston and getting off of a plane and getting on a bus, you will wipe from the face of the earth everything you've ever believed that Western culture was the source of our original civilization. It is gone in one day. Be brave enough to take a bus tour, plane, and go there. I just came back from 10 days in the jungle, going to every site, and the sites that I haven't seen, I'm now at 54 sites: Aztec, Toltec, Mayan, Sabutotec, and Olmec, Incan. And I'd like to tell you this, guys.
Got to crouch up on the mic a little bit.
I'd like to tell you this. Believe or not, that there was a civilization that existed 3,114 years ago. And whether they could build cities that could house 1 million people. The one in Guatemala is twice the size of Los Angeles. It's laid out meticulously in urban planning. It has structures larger than the Giza Plateau, and it was built in 2600 BC. That's the same time they were building the pyramids at Giza. That's 4,600 years ago, everybody. There was a culture who could plot the planets, who understood the stars, who would build cities for an event 800 years into the future with such precision that as you look at it today on fixation of Venus, you cannot comprehend how in the world could they have done this when all they had was jade, stone tools, and courage. No wheel, no metal, and exact precision understanding the solar movement of our galaxy through the precession of the equinox, moving through the constellation. There is no doubt that they understood that 26,000 years would occur for the entire galaxy to move through what we call the equinox or the constellations, precession of the constellation. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that they constructed a calendar so precise and so accurate it rivals anything constructed or used today. Anything. And that they designed this calendar based on 7 principles. Who you are in your everyday life, who you are in your farming or growing life, who you are in your spiritual life, and who you are in your service life. There's no question. And they built this, and it lasted for 3,000 years. Well, today we come to a pivotal point in our history. The first time I saw Teo was 68. It was absolutely staggering. Mm-hmm. In 1975, I got struck by lightning, and I had a near-death experience. And in that near-death experience, there came a part about where the world would be after 2004. And in the course of that we would enter into a conscious shift, like we call it dawning of ages, but that there would be a galactic shift because planets would enter a place where the sun was more or less in the middle of the galaxy, or Milky Way, and I'll leave this to Richard to explain. But that well, he knows this stuff, and I'll leave the prophecies to Sean. But what I'll do is I've been going there for 21 years, and I've been looking at it from 2 points. How in the hell did they build that crap down there? And whoever's telling you that it was a bunch of indigenous people building it with some jade tools, some rocks, and a lot of slaves is a liar. Whoever built it not only understood how the earth worked, but understood the cyclic phases of the planets, how they affected the earth, how the earth rotated in a galaxy into this universe, and how to capture knowledge and understanding of how to use that to create time and space as a marvel, not a linear perspective. So, after seeing this in the near-death experience, I became obsessed, compulsively obsessed, in understanding where this stuff came from. Teo was abandoned 700 years before the Aztecs found it. It was there 1,500 years before the Mayans. No one, the oldest civilization down there are the Olmecs, and they don't know when it was built. You're listening to history given to you by a culture, basically the Catholic Church, and the chronologue of this that is not true. So as I see this shift in consciousness, and we have astrophysics, we have dark matter, we have quantum physics, we have theoretical mechanics, and we also have our understanding of the planetary movement and influences. They knew it then. There is a change coming. It will be on multi-levels. It will come for those who have prepared for it, just like a current flowing, just like a sea captain. If you don't have your sails up and it's not rigged right, when that wind, that cosmic wind, moves across the universe, dawning an age, you'll stand around and think nothing happened. And if you have your sail up, and you have your heart open, and you're looking for shifts in paralleling universes and understanding spiritual consciousness, you can ride this wave into a dimension of understanding that 2-4 is only mythology. This is our time. We sit where the Mayans said we would be. We are at either world war or peace. Today, world war or peace. Which do you prepare for? And by answering that question to yourself, I'll tell you where you're going to be when this shift comes between 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. The 2012 story, that one exact day, that's based on an interpretation of the calendar from a Frenchman and an Englishman who sought to put it in a perspective of dealing with a Mayan interpretation. This is a whole of dawning an age, and it's coming. I've been going there 21 years, once or twice a year, walking through the ruins and thinking like a Mayan. To design my whole life and the tours that I take, if you go to danyon.com, I'm going again in October. I call them the Kick the Tires tours. Hey, everybody. You can listen up here to us all day long. You won't grasp it until you walk the ground. You won't grasp it until you walk up into an open place in the middle of the jungle and see some of the most breathtaking architecture you've ever seen. And you won't grasp it until you go and you look and you turn a corner and walk into a set of ruins. And you couldn't tell whether you were in the Indus Valley in India looking at a tiered temple or whether you were in Mexico. They're the same. Mm-hmm. The way the pillars are structured, the way the alignment of the pillars are put into place, how they aligned and set it. And when you do that, your whole heart and your whole mind opens up. I have no doubt that what we decide today and what we decide this information and how we open to channels for peace or war is going to be the difference in where we find ourselves. But anybody sitting in this room, for a minute, Mexico's not south of here, is crazy. And anybody who's sitting in this room that thinks that in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize, all the way down to the tips of Peru, that there were people who built cities, who understood the zero. Do you realize the Mayans invented the zero? And if we didn't have the zero, what would we not have on this earth today? No computers, no cell phones, no DVDs, no CDs, none of that. We of the Western world didn't get zero for 1,000 more years, and the Moors from North Africa brought it across. Well, where did the Moors get it? If you look at the Olmec culture, they have carvings of the Moors, the Chinese, the African, and they carved them in 3000 BC. Sure puts the quietus on that Columbus discovered America story, doesn't it? So, guys, we either have war or we have peace. The shift and the change from one age to another age in the end of a 26,000-year cycle, it is on us. It is proven, and Richard can give you all the planetary knowledge and information you could ever stand. It's what you'll do with that. Everybody has their expertise. Mine is walking and looking at it. Mine's kicking the tires. I listen to everybody's stories. I buy me an airplane ticket. I go down there. I go exactly where they said. I look at it. I see if it's there or it's not. It's there. A culture 3,114 years old. It's there. It is so advanced and so awe-inspiring that to live in America and to realize in Mesoamerica, Central and South America known today, you have a chance to explore what is breathtaking, what will stop your heart and open your mind to the possibilities that in the next 5 or 6 years, a new age is being born, and it's in each of us to make that difference. I put up pictures. Richard was asking me about photographs, and I'm like everybody else. I'm slow. But up on danyon.com, I'm putting all those pictures and photographs and all that stuff that I think help you make your decisions. It's all your choice. But I promise you this. when you look at dark matter, which is a scientific term for a material that holds the universe together, and all of a sudden, that whole philosophy of that we're all one and we're all connected, science has proven that it's true. And when you look at the galactic center, that in the middle of our galaxy or in the middle of our solar system, in the middle of this galaxy, as it sits in the center of the solar system, and the offshoots of that energy that's affecting solar flares, the photon belt, more energy, more light, we're expected to have the largest solar flare activity in the world history to peak in 2011. Now, when you start thinking of that kind of magnetic flux and that kind of movement, planetary alignment comes into play, then it is on us. But in practical belief, we're either going to be in world war or we're going to be at peace. We have the opportunity to seize what will only come every 26,000 years. What are we going to do with it? So here's what I ask. Look at the Mayan and the Olmecs. Look at the Aztecs, because it's easy to go there. Second, believe this panel. If you can't go there or life blocks you, believe this panel. Third, make choices about who you are if you had the opportunity to dawn an age. That if you were standing alone and by yourself, and you could create a new world because you happened to be at the right place at the right time. You know, in the Marine Corps, we always called a hero a fool at the wrong place at the wrong time. But if you were and had the opportunity and you were by yourself and you could rig your sails and you could batten down the hatches and you could catch the cosmic wind, where would you sail your vessel to? What would you look forward to? And what if you had to take your children and two of your friends on the way to where you were going? Where would that be? I ask everybody to take a trip there. It's easy and it's inexpensive, and you can walk it and see it. And then truly get ready for 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. For I guarantee you, whether anyone believes it or not, we will dawn this age. And I am so proud to see a room completely filled with people that are not fear-based. A dead person, like I have been, never sees the end of anything without seeing the beginning of something else. There is no end. There is only a new beginning. And we are poised in a new beginning. So it's how we open that door. And I thank you so much, number one, for being here today and coming to support Conscious Life. And I thank you for filling this room up with people searching for answers to succeed, not to be afraid. I happen to have seen the future. We'll win. We'll please. But if we're not careful, we're going to let a lot of stuff who's just trying to hold on. The old is trying to hold on and keep us under a grip so we don't pay attention to what's really happening spiritually. If we're grounded in war, if we're grounded in fear, we're grounded in terrorism, we will get so dense and so unfocused we'll never catch the cosmic wind. Please do not let that happen to you. Danyan.com. Thank you.
Bravo. Yay.
We've had two speakers who have told us from a spiritual point of view their perspective, and we're now also going to have an opportunity to hear from a technological point of view, the perspective of someone that I respect very much and a person who has been on this panel before. He is the director.
Thanks, God.
Thanks, Daniel.
Just trying to help you along, Betty.
I know, you're very helpful, Daddy, and I really appreciate your help. He's the,
You know, Mom's getting pretty soon, Daniel.
Ooh, honey.
he's the executive director of the Lay Foundation of Technologies and the author of several books, and has two wonderful websites on the Earth Pulse. He has also created a new CD, which I hope you'll talk to us about, and is doing a post-conference institute on Monday. Would you give a big, warm welcome to Dr. Nick Begich?
You know, I asked Betty, I said, you know, I'm not a Mayan expert for sure, and there's a lot of things that I could lecture on and talk about, and this is the second year she's asked me to be on this panel and maybe just present a little bit different perspective. And actually, my interest in science goes back to my study of crystallography and gemology through the Gemological Institute.
Speak into the microphone, Nick.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
In any case, you know, going back to as a young child, I was very interested in geology and crystallography, and I studied gemology through the Gemological Institute, and at 14 had the privilege of traveling with the Institute to Latin America and a visit to Peru, and an opportunity to see what was actually structured there, and hearing the same story about how all of this stuff got built just didn't make any sense when you really look at the material that was supposedly chopped away by other stones of equal strength. It just doesn't make sense. Everything you see down there is just incredible. When you get out on the ground, the amount of material, the amount of structure is just totally mind-boggling. Well, that, for me, when I came back and I started thinking about all of that and looking at sort of where all of this technology has gone that apparently has been lost, for me, science was always about looking in at ourselves, recognizing what we were, and then from that, sort of analyzing the world. And I think that's all of us. You know, we're sitting up here, you're sitting down there, but we're all really sitting in exactly the same place as human beings. And I think I really believe that we are truly the outward expression of whatever creation is. And science is now telling us that, you know, within each of us is a hologram of the entire universe, which I think is a pretty amazing kind of concept. The idea that within us is incredible potentials that we just have to awaken. And that's what I think is happening right now. As I've traveled in the last 12 years, lecturing primarily on technology, there has been a phenomenal speed rate pickup on the way technology is advancing. If you go back to the mid-'80s, technology was doubling about every 5 years. This is from the invention of the wheel to where we are at the moment. Every 5 years by the mid-'80s. Today, it's about every 9 months. Now, that's a pretty phenomenal rate, and that rate is about to accelerate at an incredible rate based upon new breakthroughs in science. There are going to be some new stories coming out on quantum computing as an example. Quantum computers, to put this in perspective, what a modern computer can do, the supercomputers today, and I'll give you an example. The biggest computer in the world last summer was tested, and it had a speed of 280.6 teraflops. Now, what does that mean? That's the equivalent of 6.6 billion people on the planet with hand calculators running a calculation every 5 seconds for 60 hours to do what that computer can do in 1 second. Now, quantum computers will do what a modern computer at that scale can do in an hour, what would otherwise take 1 trillion years. So when we make this jump, and you're going to start reading stories about quantum computers in the next several weeks, because there's some things going on here in California that are going to make the mainstream media. One of the big concerns about quantum computers was the observer effects, you know, the computing. And so they have figured out a way to create fields that separate that so that quantum computing might actually take place within this next 4 or 5 years on a grand scale. That's the equivalent of looking at a supercomputer today like you would look at an abacus. I mean, that's the kind of change that potentially is there. And then when you see the acceleration of technology, it won't be doubling every 9 months. It'll be doubling every few days.
Oh, God.
Now, the impact of assessing that really has a lot to do with our ability to think and function at a much, much higher level than we today. And when you look at supercomputers, there's 3 of them being clustered together in Switzerland right now to look at the brain, to be able to look at a complete chain of neurons firing in the brain when you have a specific thought so they can map them in 3 dimensions. Now it takes 3 of those supercomputers to do what your brain, every one of us, can do. So think about it from this perspective. Flip this around a little bit. You are that quantum computer. What restricts our access to that is our own belief systems, our own regulation, our own throttle on what we're capable of. But there's not a single person in this room that doesn't have greater capacity than the best quantum computers being contemplated today. I think that's the generation we're in. We have an opportunity not only to change the way the world looks, but change the very way in which we function as human beings, collectively, separately, and ultimately as sovereign individuals created, I believe, in the image of the Creator itself, whatever that means to every one of us. Recognizing some of that, I think, is what all of us have said in all of our own language. You know, language gets in the way of an awful lot. You know, we use words to describe our beliefs and our value systems, and sometimes those words offend, not meaning to. I mean, for instance, if I say the word environment in this room, most people would feel fairly comfortable with that. If I was at the Republican convention, you might feel much differently. But if I use the word stewardship in the Republican convention, there would be there. And we're really saying the same thing. You know, you can say a 4-letter word in church and offend everyone, or you can recognize that the value and language that we use either builds people up and is constructive or destructive, and being sensitive enough to other people's belief systems, I think, is the challenge. You know, where we are today is, I think, at that pinnacle where we're either going to decide to reshape this world in a very, very different direction, and it's going to come from the sovereignty of each individual acting on what we know to be true. You know, I used to contemplate the issue of faith as a young person and wonder about this mystery, and I was raised a Catholic and never was confirmed. And the reason I wasn't confirmed was with a conversation with a priest, and I said, explain to me what is faith. Couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And for me, after many years of thinking about it, faith is very simple. It's acting on what we know to be right and true. Doing something, coupling what's in our heart, what's in our minds with a real action. You know, I'm very far off place from the mainstream. I live in Alaska. And I mean, most of you probably heard me on radio or heard me in a different forum or another. And you can do virtually anything from where you sit at the moment if we just begin to act within the realm of our own influence. That's not saying that you'll do the same things as anyone on this stage or anywhere else, but each of us has a sphere of influence that we can impact. And we need to begin doing that. Don't leap beyond that. That creates anxiety, creates tension, it creates all kinds of negative emotion because you're beyond the place where you're supposed to be. Your calling is right where you're at. It's not about where you've been, it's not about where you're going, it's what you do in the moment and how you affect change in the moment with those things around us. And I think when I look at all of the things that have happened, I think of the analysis of what's a small thing and what's a big thing. There are no small things. You know, and I think back on some of the things that have happened in the last 12 years that have shaped the direction of my research, and it's in what most people would call the very small things, where someone just like you, just like me, acted on what they knew to be right and true and did something. You know, and I say to folks, there's a very simple way to do this on a regular basis. I've said it a lot. Take and write down the one issue, whether it's anything we're talking about here at this conference, anything that you're hearing in this conference, write that thing down. Write down just a couple of things that you can do in less than 10 minutes and begin doing it. You know, and that changes everything when you recognize that you're part of the most incredible organic, I call it the organic internet. It's the human race. You don't have to wait for leadership. You're standing in it. Each one of us knows intuitively and absolutely the directions that we should take. Usually it's our own belief systems that say, oh, I can't. You can. I think every one of us that have done anything meaningful in life has done it usually, not at the best of times, we've usually done it in our darkest hours. And that's the threshold I think we're on. You know, we're in that dark hour. And from that, everyone with gray hair in the room knows what I'm saying, is we learn the best from those things that have been the roughest on us. We don't learn when everything's rosy. We just kind of drift through those periods. We're in that dark hour, and we need to bring back from that dark hour the light that rests within us, that connects us to one another, in such a fundamental way that that power in this room represents more than is necessary to change everything about this planet, everything about what we're doing. Those with a background, a Christian background, are worrying about Armageddon. And you know what brings it about, and you can read it. You can read it in Revelations 11:18. It says, those that destroy the earth, that's who God's going to destroy. We've all played a part in that. And that's, again, gets back to this stewardship question or environmental. Which is it? Let's be sensitive to the words we use. Let's be sensitive to the constructs we create and recognize there's a million paths to the finish line, and we each have our own. And it's acting on what we need to do next, not succumbing to fear. You know, we're living in a political environment that bases its entire action on creating fear and anxiety in people. And if you look at brain activity of people who are experiencing fear or negative emotions, you get what are called incoherent brain patterns, the kind that don't lend to critical and rational thinking. On the other hand, when you experience compassion, empathy, and love, you get a very coherent, rhythmic pattern within the brain frequencies. This is really relevant to everything we're talking about here on this panel. The energy of this planet is changing. It's demonstrating it in tremendous ways. People are talking about it's human beings doing it. On one level, perhaps that's correct, but not the level that you're reading about in the newspapers. It's more than that. We are creating the reality that we're facing. And if we allow that reality to be created on fear, then we will have those wars. And we will have even more incredible wars than ever before, because the technology that we have today is the very technology that can either destroy this earth or change it dramatically into a direction where all of us recognize our own power and begin to act on it. We need to step out of our limits, rise out of the ashes of our apathy, and change about the planet, starting with the small things that surround us every day.
Amen. Amen. Well done.
Thank you, Nick. Our next speaker is well known to everybody in this room,
Except that guy.
whoever he is. He's the publisher of the Delphi Associates newsletter. He's a teacher of spiritual remote viewing. He's made hundreds of very accurate predictions psychically, and he's going to speak to us next. His name is Sean David Morton.
Yay! Now, if you think your mind was warped, according to, you know that Nick story about when you think about death and destruction and terror, how warped your brain gets as opposed to love and peace? Well, get ready for some serious brain You go, Sean David.
You know, I've been a fan of Daniel Brinkley's for years, and I kept thinking to myself, man, if I could only get struck by a bolt of lightning, I too could have magic powers. And I did everything. I played golf in the rain. I talked on my cell phone in a storm. I didn't stand under trees when a tornado was coming by. Every single thing I could do. Not a spark. Not a flicker. So one day I'm sitting around my house in my underpants, nothing better to do. And I took a knife and I looked at the toaster and I jammed that knife in the toaster. And I received the amazing ability to shake on the ground and poop my pants. That's what I got. And it took me years to figure out, do I use this ability for good or evil? Anyway, you know, the thing about these panels is I always feel like I think we should all be wearing white shirts and black ties with pocket protectors. I feel like the Japanese scientists in Godzilla that they're always trying to warn people that, you know, ships are disappearing and tidal waves are coming, and that, no, honest, Godzilla, he really out there. I swear to God, we must defend Tokyo. And I always remember that the scientists, nobody ever believed them until Godzilla was you know, cruising for hookers in downtown Tokyo. And and so the great thing about this panel is that we're talking about future about what's going on as far as our future goes and how it's gonna shape up. So with that thought, and I just have a brief encapsulation to talk about this. So what I try to do is I try to take the cosmic and the mundane and sort of link them together into, you know, where does the rubber meet the road? What is important to all of you? Angels are all great and they're all wonderful and they're all fluffy and they bless us and they protect us, but, you know, the angels didn't pay my month, so I have to think in terms of that. I have a message for you. I am the great prophet Papa O Mau Mau, and I am going to channel Papa O Mau Mau now. And Papa O Mau Mau says a message from the ancient Egyptians that the ancient Egyptians just want to say one thing. You want to know what that one thing is? Okay, they don't want to know.
Party.
That one thing is that the ancient Egyptians love you. The Mayans love you. The Aztecs love you. You know why? They went to so much trouble to be able to build stone monuments that have now existed down through time to tell you in this generation, right now, and these people in this room, to talk about this particular period of time being so special and so amazing and so dynamic that every other person in this room is going to take a quantum leap far and above anything you ever thought possible before. And the great thing about studying everything that Richard has done and everything that Daniel has done and all the stuff that if you're talking about the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incans and the ancient Egyptians and going all the way back through time, these ancient cultures knew more about our future and about the path that was laid down to humanity than any of us in this room know today. And so the remarkable thing is that they had a message of love for all of you that they had to find a way to pass down through time, because they knew that it would be them incarnating over and over and over again to this particular period in time, and they needed to find a way to communicate down through time, knowing that scrolls can disappear, that stone tablets can be destroyed, that scriptures and dogma would be rewritten by men of greed and men of fear and men of power. And so how do you relate that? You build stone monuments, amazing stone monuments, like the Great Pyramid. You use geometry and mathematics able to communicate universal ideas in a universal language to talk to you in the future about what's going down. We got 5 years. I've been doing this probably, 15, 20 years or so, and I've been talking about this particular unique period of time, this quantum leap, this activation of ascension, this period where we would go from a 3-chakra system to the eat chakras, the talk chakras, and the reproductive chakras, the eat, fun, and talk chakras, if you will, and we only talk to food and fun, and go to a 7-chakra system to a 12-chakra system where we become winged beings, angelic winged beings, if you will, that are processing. Literally, it was the best analogy I've heard in a long time. Daniel's analogy about putting up your sails to get ready for the great wind that's going to come, because believe me, brothers and sisters, it's going to blow. And in this process, the fascinating thing for me about prophecy is we have the grand design. Know through looking at the Great Pyramid of Giza that there are 3 paths that humanity is going to take. There is a path that goes down into a pit that is a terrible, depressing place. It's also known as the Well of Souls. That's 151 feet beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza that has an edge or a lip on that pit that humanity begins to degrade, if you will, to devolve in chunks and starts and stops all the way down to the bottom of the pit beginning approximately 2005 or so. Right on cue, here comes Katrina, here comes the hurricanes, here comes the destruction of New Orleans, here comes the establishment for the first time of martial law in the United States, which then leads to the establishment of the federal military patrolling our borders, the end of posse comitatus, the end of habeas corpus, the end of all these things that they used to actually grease through by destroying the city of New Orleans, which, by the way, they blew a couple of levees in order to make this possible so that Halliburton could go in and buy up all the property, and there's all kinds of oil under there as well. So don't let them think there's just this natural that the government wasn't responding to. There was a reason why they weren't doing it. The challenge here is that in 2005, you are seeing this downward path, and this is one group of humanity. The fact that there are people in this room now, as opposed to stadiums filling with people trying out for American Idol, IDLE, a karaoke contest, whereas you can get a whole stadium full of people to stand around and have Simon Cowell call you an idiot. But the challenge is you have an expo like this to have and hear about your future and what's going to happen in the future is really kind of a sad state of affairs. And you and I both know that these 3 paths, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be on the left-hand side, the goat, so to speak, as the Bible calls it, that are going to be simply flushed down into the pit. I used to think that you could probably balance out, everybody that watched X-Files would go to heaven, and everybody who watched, Friends would just be flushed right down the toilet. But it was one of those, make it really easy for God, just American Idol. So
Don't you love him?
So there's a middle path. There's a middle path. And the middle path is kind of interesting. The middle path is not so bad, but the middle path begins in the pyramid with Paul. Begins about 48 AD and begins a divergence of the crystalline structure of Christianity. When Jesus of Nazareth, or Emmanuel ben Joseph, when he walked the earth and he came here, he had a very specific message for the people here. And I challenge most people out there, next time you talk to a rabbi or a priest or whatever, why don't you try to ask them, and I did this in Nepal, actually. I lived in a monastery in Nepal, Tangbache, and Rinpoche Lobsang Tumdun asked me, describe Christianity for me. Now, try to explain Christianity to a Hindu. Has anybody been to India and tried to explain our traditions? Because I literally had a Hindu driver who said to me, so let me get this straight. So Jesus is the Son of God, and he dies on the cross, and he lays in a tomb for 3 days, and he arises as a great rabbit, and he hides eggs for the little children, and then he hides the eggs, but then he escapes and he goes to the North Pole and eats a lot of food and becomes very fat and has a wife and wears a red suit and comes with a reindeer and gives presents to. That's Christianity, isn't it? And I just looked at him and said, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. That's all right. So Rinpoche said to me, describe Christianity. And I said, well, okay, Jesus was a good guy and he died on the cross and he rises 3 days later. And he said, no. He said, that's a story about Jesus. We have all kinds of stories about Buddha. Buddha did this, Buddha did that, Buddha walked on water, Buddha ate a sandwich, Buddha went bowling, all kinds of stuff about Buddha. Very, very into bowling, Buddha. And I said, well, okay. And I took out a Bible that I had with me and I read the Sermon on the Mount. And I read the Sermon on the Mount and Rinpoche sat there and he sort of meditated through it and he said, oh, so Jesus was a Buddhist. I said, not exactly. And he said, well, look at this. And he takes out a diatribe of Buddha and reads it. And it's virtually verbatim, word for word. And I began to realize that in Western society, where I am trying to reintroduce the concept of monotheism, try to think of that for a while, that we're reintroducing the concept of monotheism, and you're trying to look at Christianity, that this divergence began for the people on the middle path of the religion about Jesus and the religion of Jesus. Get the difference? And so the difference religion of Jesus, the religion about Jesus, those who are interested in this middle path, they all go into the Queen's Chamber. And the Queen's Chamber is, you can dream. It's the mo is better sort of thing. That if I just had mo of something, it'd be better. If I had mo money, it'd be better. If I had mo women, it'd be better. If I had mo cars, it'd be better. It is going to be the motto of the American civilization. The Greeks were know thyself. The Egyptians were as above, so below. America will have in Latin, mo is better. That'll just be the sign. That will what they put on the stone of the United States of America is if I just had mo, it'd be better. And people don't understand that mo ain't better. And so the actual aspect of this is that now we are entering the King's Chamber. And the King's Chamber is so fascinating because the entire building structure of the Great Pyramid shifts on February 21st of 1999. And it goes from base granite to red granite. And everywhere you see red granite in Egypt, that means something's going on. That means there is spirit. That means something holy. That means the Holy Spirit infuses it directly. And this begins a 40-year period from 1999 to approximately the year 2039 as a 40-year Exodus period that is a period of cleansing of the tabernacle and the cleansing of the temple itself and a cleansing of the human heart specifically in preparation for the next Messiah in 2039. This is predicted by the pyramid. And by the way, the Great Pyramid predicts that the last Messiah would be born 2 BC. Points to the exact location the Messiah would be born, which is a couple hundred yards from the cave of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Talks about that this Messiah would leave on April 1st of 33 AD. It's in the time coding of the pyramids. And now you're being told that many of you within your lifetime, this messianic figure is going to come again and create a theological government literally on earth, a messianic government where we will have a theocracy, if you will, once again. Now, the challenge of this is that people in the past are trying to communicate that this is your responsibility. You're the people that have to cleanse the tabernacle. You're the people that have to open your hearts. You're the people that have to prepare the space that's available for all of this to start coming together. Now, if you realize that generations have predicted you, every prophecy is about you. Every prophecy is about what you're going to do and what actions you're going to take. That's a hell of a responsibility, don't you think? Can I get an amen? So there you go. So the idea is If you want to understand the core synthesis, and if you want to take all the gobbledygook of the stone monuments and the Mayans and the Incans and whatever else, and remember, Montezuma himself was a student of the pyramid of Teotihuacan. He was fascinated by the mystery, which means that pyramid predated his culture by many thousands of years. Here's the core essence, and I can give you dates, and we can talk about the exact dates of when things are going on. For example, in June of 2004, there was a Venus transit across the sun, which re-empowered the feminine, re-empowered the mother, re-empowered the empowerment of the female. Unfortunately, out of that we get Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi. But at the same time, for every Hillary Clinton, there's got to be an homage, in my opinion. There has to be an Earth Mother essence that practices unconditional motherly love.
Betty Bender.
We have another one, Betty Bender, I might add. Unconditional motherly love, which she's going to punish us all pretty soon. There's another harmonic convergence. Let me just roll some dates out here. There's another harmonic convergence coming in May 27th, 28th, 29th of 2010. We have an opportunity, seeing the wonders that happened in 1987, to all get together in 2010, our last chance to link up as a global community, as a new sphere, to use the technologies of the internet and cell phones and computers and whatever else to link us all together. My idea, because this is Los Angeles and we are the throat chakra, and by the way, we are not just the city of the angels. This city was actually named after a 15th century painting called the Thessalon, and the name of the city actually is Our Mother Mary, the ascended, coronated queen of the angels. And what they did is they just shortened it to the angels. And you will notice that St. Monica was sacred to Mary, St. Peter or San Pedro. You're surrounded, the communication chakra of the entire planet, the throat, which is downtown Los Angeles. It's at the gazebo on Alvera Street. It's got a little fence around it. They put a little scene of the nativity on it right there. That's the throat chakra. And it's surrounded by the St. Gabriel Mountains. And of course, was the angel of communication, the angel of annunciation. And so this essence of what's going on, the throat chakra, means that everything you think and see here, you have the ability to communicate on a global level. That's why we have TV. That's why we have radio. That's why, and I say to the people of Los Angeles, it's up to you. It's your responsibility. And you know what they say? They say, why me? And I say, because you're on television, stupid. Because you make movies, dummy. Because you can tell stories that can change the world across the planet. And instead, the movie, it's 100 years old and it still thinks it's 12. I mean, instead of getting movies like, The Secret, for example, around the world, we get, Black Christmas 5 or something, or, just horror movie after horror movie after horror movie. So the challenge of all this is the core synthesis. 2010 is the next harmonic convergence. I can talk all about 2012. In May of 2012, there's going to be a massive solar eclipse over the western United States, specifically over Los Angeles, and there's going to be an eclipse that's going to be centered in May of 2012. We'll have an eclipse that will center over Chichen Itza, over the Great Pyramid, that will align for the first time in 27,000 years the Pleiades, the Sun, and the Moon directly over Chichen Itza in May of 2012. And then we have the alignment of 27 degrees Sagittarius when the Sun aligns with the center of the solar system in December 21st, 22nd, 23rd of 2012, when the Sun is going to be going through the most massive solar cycle ever in our history, called Cycle 24. Cycle 23 barely ended. Cycle 24 is what's next. So in conclusion of this, the core synthesis of what the Mayans want us to know in these last 7 days of their calendar leading up to the 2011 and 2012 time frame were this. All is one. Life has purpose. God is love. Now that seems easy, but what they want you to know is that those three simple phrases, if you could put them on bumper stickers or t-shirts or whatever else, all is one means that there is between you and I, that we are all simply fingers on the hands of God. Hopefully not the middle finger, but we're all fingers on the hands of God. And that diversity means that our enemies are in fact ourselves. And can we do something about the war in Iran? Can we do something about, Iraq? Can we do something about George Bush being just dog nuts crazy? No. But we can do something about us, and we can do something about what we do to make ourselves better. You know who should be speaking at this, by the way? Let me just give him some props. We have probably one of the greatest spiritual masters that has walked the planet for a while. You know what his name is? Pete Carroll. You know who Pete Carroll is? Pete Carroll, the head coach of the USC Trojans. You know why? Because I go to lunches on Monday with Pete Carroll. You know what Pete Carroll says? Pete Carroll says, it's not about them, it's about us. It's about what we do. What can we do to be the best we can be? It's not about UCLA, it's not about Arizona, it's not about Cal. He says, you know why we lost this game? We lost this game because we can't be the best that we can be. We don't worry about anybody else. We do what we do because time something happens, we think, what do we do to create that circumstance? How do we take responsibility for that? How do we raise the bar so that we can be the best that we've ever been? Now, he's taken spiritual philosophy. Here's a guy who's been to the Esalen Institute. Here's a guy who took EST. Here's a guy who literally is a metaphysical master, if you will, who's put together one of the best football programs in the nation as an aspect of spirituality becoming physical. And the only reason I say that is because when all is one and there's no difference between you and I, and we are all extra expressions of the creator, of the love force, then that brings the entire planet together. That life has purpose is particularly unique. You know why? Because that means no matter who's done you wrong, who's done you dirt, no matter how many rotten licks, low tricks, dirty tricks that you've taken throughout your life, no matter who's done you lousy, you can't blame anybody else because you're exactly in the place you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, for the reason you're supposed to be there. Do you get me? Do you feel me? Can I get an amen?
Amen.
And the last one, of course, is God is love. And why is that important? It every day, but that means that the prima mobile, the first thought of the universe, is for your best well-being. The first thought in the universe means for you as a growing, evolving soul to be able to expand, to be able to be conscious, to be able to become gods yourselves. And of course, the word God, generator, operator, destroyer. And G-O-D means that you can generate, operate, and destroy every circumstance, every feeling, everything that's going on in your own life. It's not about anybody else. We've got to start in Los Angeles. Talk about the me generation and Los Angeles being, we got big egos. Yeah, you know why? Because it's about us. And it's about what we can do to be the best we can be, to raise the bar better than anybody that can ever do it. Because people look to us for fashion. They look to us for movies, look to us for radio. We are the center of communication. And the better we communicate our goals and where we think the future is going, then the better place the world is going to be. Give me an amen. Thank you.
Way to go.
Thank you for your sermon. Thank you, Sean.
Praise the Lord. Oh, there you go.
Our last speaker on the panel has a wonderful ability not only to present information about astronomy, mathematics, geometry, and many other events connected with 2012 and our history, but also has the ability to integrate information from everybody who has spoken before him as is relevant to what he's going to present. And it's one of the many reasons that our final speaker on this panel, who is the author of Monuments of Mars, if you haven't read it, you should, founder, principal investigator of the Enterprise mission, former science advisor to CBS News and Walter Cronkite, and science advisor to Coast AM Radio. And if you don't know who he is by now, you have a wonderful treat in store. He is Richard C. Hoagland.
Yay!
Thank you, Betty. Thank you so much. You know, there's a real God who makes you come last on a panel like this. I think it's God. How do I follow Sean and Nick and Daniel and Dana? So I'm going to keep it very brief.
You'll handle it.
With a little help from my friends, who I know are not shy. What you've heard in the last hour or so is really important because I have only one difference with Daniel, who is putting the change in the future. And I know this is not a surprise to him, but the change is upon us. How many of you were here last year? How many were at this thing last year? All right.
Most of it, good.
Good, excellent. Don't you feel a change in this entire society? Don't you mark it as last November? I mean, we are immersed in almost C.P. Snow's two cultures, except it isn't the literature folks and the science folks in two separate boats in separate directions, as he pictured it. It's the so-called mainstream culture, the reality which we live every day, where we have to pay our rent and all that other interesting stuff, and then the life of the mind and the life of the heart that those of us at this expo live and lead, which has to do with the more interesting and obviously far more important aspects of reality, which is why are we here, who are we, and where are we going? And it's so nice to see, even with great opposition, as there has been around some of the periphery of the expo. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it has to do with that interesting set of stuff going on out front of the hotel. I mean, talk about the dichotomy brought down to reality of the light and the dark. And what you don't know is the lies that those folks outside have been led to believe, because most of those people are well-meaning people who are on the wrong side, not because they want to be, but because they have been misled. They think they're fighting for the light because the people who are leading them have darker designs, and it's going to be interesting to see how many of those people actually come in here and listen and partake of what's going on and realize that maybe they got it a little bit wrong. That was kind of like a footnote. What I was going to make
And
is...
thanks, Richard. Yeah, but that's really important, what Richard's saying. I don't mean it, but it's really important take to heart what Richard's saying, because he's really complimenting the magnificence of you people, because we know the inner out dynamics of what's occurring, and that's a great compliment to you from Richard.
Thank you, Daniel. My point about where we are now versus where we were a year ago is that I can see extraordinary change in the mainstream culture. I'm a kind of a mainstream culture nut. I watch television a lot. Drives Robin nuts. I watched Friends. I liked Friends. So I guess I know where I'm going.
It's not funny. Something funny.
If you want to talk to the culture in which you live, you have to understand the culture in which you live. What's interesting to me is that I'm watching incredible dynamic change at the level of the mainstream. To give you one clear example, that we're not approaching this interesting nodal point, we're in it. We're right in it. And I love, Daniel, your metaphorical phrase about raising sail. Because I love sailing. I love ships. You know, we are on a cosmic voyage from the moment we're born forever. I mean, it doesn't stop just because you're not here. And that metaphor is so appropriate because a lot of people in the mainstream world have not yet raised their sails, but they will. Change is upon us. There is a tremendous dynamic change that's upon us, and I'll give you one clear example. Before 2000 and the election of George Bush, kind of, over Al Gore, kind of, this culture had certain mindsets. And those mindsets particularly were triggered by the events of 9/11, which then allowed the stampede, the cascade, where almost every person in the House and Senate gave George Bush carte blanche to do whatever he wanted and the folks around him wanted to do. We're seeing a very similar pattern leading from Iraq now to Iran. But there's one stunning difference. Everybody's asking questions. Nightly, Chris Matthews, a mainstream icon that I kind of really like, is running on that program comparison, side-by-side video of George Bush utterances prior to Iraq and now George Bush utterances prior to Iran. And he's making the point we're being led down a path. Somebody is beating the drum beats. They're using the same fear tactics, the same spinning of evidence, etc. But let's not follow this goat over that cliff this time. And this isn't those of us on this panel speaking. This is a mainstream guy. You watch Keith Olbermann, who has the most interesting newscast on television. I mean, he is by far light years ahead of the Cronkite crowd that I used to hang out with, because the idiom of Countdown is the idiom of 21st century media. It's a mixture of incredibly stupid entertainment and incredibly insightful analysis. And the fact that he has as his role model, you know, the guy who every night would say 30, 40, 50 years ago, good night and good luck, is really interesting because he is doing extraordinary editorials. And I think it was Olbermann's editorials before the election of November 7th, 2006, that precipitated this cultural shift where more people realized that if out to the polls and they didn't vote, nothing would change. And startlingly, they did get out, they did vote in such numbers that the attempts at rigging the polls simply do not work, because they cannot work if the disparity is too great. They only work when you're at a 50-50. Then a few percentage points and you can steal the election. You can steal the culture. You can steal the consciousness. Well, it didn't work in 2006 in November. And what did we get? We got a C-state change. There are Republicans now jumping off the ship of state in droves. They have, the rear guard has stymied the efforts to get this resolution against the surge in Iraq. And so there's a whole body of Republicans who are going to vote with their feet and who are going to break cloture, which means they're going to be able to actually have an up or down vote on a resolution. And they're now talking about attaching to every single bill that goes to the House and Senate a vote against the escalation of the war. That was unthinkable even a year ago. Unthinkable. And when you see the mainstream changing, I mean, I come to these things and I talk to these people, you people, us people, and it's like speaking to the choir. It's wonderful. It's a love fest. You know, you get a lot of positive reinforcement, but it's not going to change the mainstream. And unless we change the mainstream, nothing really will change. Now, I agree with Sean. The change begins at home. But I like to reach for the stars, I mean, metaphorically and physically. And I want to change the culture in which I live because, frankly, I want a better culture. I would like to be able to be here past 2012. Okay? I want to see what happens when we go through the hourglass. Because the physics says that things are coming to, I used that term before, a nodal point of preeminent, extraordinary change. And the reason there's so much ferment in the world right now, in my model, is because the unseen guys behind the scene are desperately trying to craft the public consciousness which will define the future we live in after we go through this nodal point of change. And they're trying to define it as a future of fear. Well, I got news. 2% apparently united people outweigh 98% of chaotic, fear-based people. All it takes, I keep telling Robin over and over again to the point of boredom, all it takes is 2%. Or to use that old Marin joke, you know, how many psychiatrists it take to change a light bulb in Marin? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. All it takes is for those of us that really want change, link together coherence. And here's where I'm going to get to the physics part of this. Because as someone who has been interested in metaphysics for quite a while, but very disbelieving, very skeptical, because I come, of course, from a science background, what I have found, having gone through the Martian doorway, which is what I call my last 25 years of looking at ruins on Mars and ruins on the moon, which you're going to hear about tonight and more about on Monday night, I have found that there is this extraordinary legacy which has been bequeathed to us from those who came before. Now, I tend to agree with Sean that those who came before are probably us. That, you know, it's who would remember Telly Savalas and Kojak? Who loves you, baby? Well, who loves you best but yourself? Now, suppose you were of a time and an idiom and a culture that realized that you would come back and come back, Mr. DeMille, until you got it right. And you realized that there was this physics pacing events in the solar system, and that at some point there'd be this real interesting shift possible in one of two directions, predicated by the background matrix in which we're all immersed called reality, 3D reality, and that this was part of a cyclic thing which has as one of the key cycles this 26,000-year precession because of the alignment between the Earth and the Sun and the center of the galaxy, which is 26,000 light years, by the way, beyond the Sun, Daniel, just so you get that right, okay?
Well, I keep you around.
Thanks. It's all about alignments, okay? And suppose that group of people realized, because they had that insight and they had that science and it had been extraordinarily ancient when they were conceived into this reality, that they would unfortunately be back here it happened again and that bad
so
things
cool.
could happen, so they better leave themselves some mnemonic devices, some memory things. My metaphor is that you wake up tomorrow morning in a hotel room and you don't know who you are. You have no clue how you got there. The night before is a total blur. It's like Lost Weekend, great film. But you know that you have to figure out who you are by the end of the day, or else something bad's going to happen. That feeling that you got to figure it out. And so you start looking around that room. And you look in the bathroom, and you look on the, you didn't leave, nothing's on the mirror, there's no lipstick, which says whatever. And you look around, you look in the drawers, and finally you find a piece of paper in the bedside table, and it says, "Look in the left-hand drawer, dummy." And there you find a book that you have written and left for yourself because you knew at some point in the past you were going to wake up with amnesia in that room, and you would need a decoding mechanism, a code key, to figure out why you were there, what you were doing there in that place, and where you were going. Well, the monuments that Sean talked about eloquently at Giza, in Mexico, all over the planet. I mean, they're all over the planet. The ancient stone circles in Celtic England and Ireland and Scotland and in Karnak and that. The Hopewell culture, all those interesting mounds all over the American Midwest. I mean, nowhere on earth. The Zimbabwe ruins, in South Africa. The Onegoni stuff, which is buried under hundreds of feet of water now off Okinawa. Everywhere on this planet you look, you see evidence of an extraordinary culture with extraordinary cultural and spiritual ascendants who our guys look on like absolute idiots. Oh, they couldn't have done that, because they didn't have the tools. They didn't have the brains. They're not as smart as we are. We're the technological supermen of planet Earth. Well, a wake-up call. We're not. We're probably at the bottom of the rung of what human capacity was and is capable of, and we left ourselves these devices to remind ourselves what it is we have to rediscover. I have said of my own journey that what Enterprise is discovering, it's not discovering, it's rediscovering. And the same mathematics I found on Mars, which convinced me that the Martian ruins were real, oh, and by the way, they were also us, and that lengthens everything out by orders of magnitude, something like your trillions in the supercomputer world, also is a cautionary tale for what can happen if you're stupid and dumb and think you know everything. Because change is coming. The cosmic wind is coming, and we're seeing the first ripples. Now, equally in sync with what Sean said and what Daniel said, I agree it's a moment of great potential for either positive or negative outcomes. And the dividing line, Sean, I think is going to be that 2%. The people who have basically raised their sails, who are asking the question. And we saw in this last election more and more of the mainstream, and more of the mainstream pundits, the commentators, the people who basically imprint their vision through this town on the world. Even if they're in Washington, it ultimately is Hollywood. It's ultimately LA. It's the throat thing. Those people are asking questions, and then all the people in the mainstream that don't know what questions themselves to ask will begin to get the idea, hey, maybe asking thing. Because a lot of the interference with asking questions has to do with fear. It has to do with inhibitions of not being given permission from childhood to be the out man out or out woman out on asking embarrassing questions. People like to fit in. It's only, quote, human. This is kind of a rambling discourse, but
I think you're doing terrific.
But I'm trying to knit together some things that are very important. The one thing I've taken away from walking through the Martian doorway is that underlying all of this, which can sound to a lot of mainstream folks as airy-fairy woo-woo, there is a real physics. And I have been able to measure it. Mm-hmm. What Enterprise set up at Coral Castle in June of 2004 was our first experiment in using a technological device, a little vibrating tuning fork in a an accutron, which was invented by the Swiss back in 1965, quietly taken by NASA to be put in every spacecraft, and then quietly taken out by NASA from every spacecraft when they realized that it wasn't a nice timekeeping standard like they thought it would be. It turns out to change frequency with the changing physics. And I have been able to now graph several cosmic events, cosmic alignments, including total solar eclipse, including the transit of Venus across the sun in June of 2004, including in November the transit of Mercury across the sun, which occurred just before this defining election on November 7th. Within hours of that transit, we had this sea state change. Now you might ask yourself, Dana, astrologically, what could these two things have in common? The answer I was able to measure, because I can show you on the graph that when Mercury entered the sun, began crossing the disk as Venus, you got an abrupt frequency shift up in frequency. And when it left the sun, the frequency went back down. I can show this in physical instrumentality, that great line from Forbidden Planet. So now we have a physics basis for astrology, which is going to blow, a lot of mainstream folks' minds, because they cannot handle the idea that, yes, there is a cosmic connection to human events that takes place on this planet, but I can prove to any astrologer you want to bring to Enterprise that we can now demonstrate a physical basis for fundamental astrological alignments.
Astronomer or astrologer?
Both.
You
Yeah.
said astrologer.
That's
Well, but
powerful.
astrologers basically have been going on patterns. They don't have a science. They don't understand the influence between the cosmos and Earth. They think there is one because they see the pattern, but it's an empirical pattern. What we have now brought to the table is a physics underlying that pattern, and the physics, boys and
powerful.
girls,
That's
ladies and gentlemen,
powerful.
That's cool.
is based in Russian studies that go back pre-Stalinistic era, called torsion physics, which with the collapse of the Soviet Union has come out of the closet, is now available on the internet. If anybody, by the way, reads Russian, I have about a stack of Russian papers on this, that high.
I can't wait.
Okay, but it was like 2 years ago when I got access to this, it was like being given $1 million or $10 million Christmas gift, because all of the studies that I have been too poor at Enterprise to fund, because you guys have been late on your contributions, okay, has been bequeathed to us through this extraordinary Russian set of papers. Something like 10,000 papers have been published in the world in the last 15, 20 years on torsion physics. Over half are from the former Soviet Union. And this only came about because of the declassification of the KGB files and all that, and the guys could come out of the closet and they could talk about it. And there's still a kind of a rearguard action of the KGB trying to attack some of these physicists, claiming they're, Shipov is one guy they really got in their line of fire, because he's the leading theoretical physicist. But it's like Shipov had been reading, my hyperdimensional stuff, from the day he was born. The torsion physics says, theoretically, is what Enterprise have been able to measure. And the Russian named Kozyrev, who you saw if you saw my workshop last year, the bottom line is this is a real science. But it is not limited to the interaction of planets and stars and the galaxy and the alignment in 2012, which is a huge torsion event. It also is connected to this phenomenology called life and consciousness. This is demonstrated in umpteen experiments I could bore you with for the next 3 hours, so I won't do that. The bottom line of all that is, and this is where Art Bell's consciousness experiments on COAST and George's consciousness experiments on COAST are so extraordinarily important. Because with this network and those 500 affiliates and the millions of people that group of people can talk to, over and above the people in this room, we have the means, we have to create the coherence in the torsion field to decide and make any future we really want, provided the light bulb really wants it. And that's all I have to say.
Hey. Oh, don't go. This is the good part. Don't go.